the Weird Kids, and I'll let Zach describe what it's about. But it's been on the festival circuit for a while now. We saw it at Chattanooga. It's played at the Brooklyn Film Festival. Played at the Plaza here in El Paso, which is awesome. But Zach, how about you
Yeah.
describe to us what the Weird Kids is about?
The Weird Kids is I mean it's kind of a coming of age tale that's mixed in with a little bit of horror. And it, basically it follows three kind of 12-year-old kids, uh, Doug, Fat, and Mel. And on this weekend, Doug's older brother, teenage brother Wyatt, his girlfriend Mary, take them out camping for an excursion in the desert. And on the way there, they kind of catch wind that there may or may not be a creature, like the locals around there speak of this creature that may or may not be roaming the park at night hunting people, and so they kind of over the course of the movie figure out if that's real or how real it is and what it actually means. But it kind of it harkens back to the type of kids movies that I grew up with, and then also like gateway horror movies that I grew up with, things I caught on late night cable that I should have been watching when I was over at friends' houses and stuff like that.
Sure.
And
What was the inspiration for the Weird Kids?
the inspiration, oddly enough, I about gosh, it would have been 8.5 years ago, 9 years ago almost. My wife and I found out that we were pregnant with our first child, and something in the reality setting in that I was going to be a father and going to be like this, whatever, grown up all of a sudden, started making me really, I had to just like wanting to, number one, get my shit together. Number two, made me want to start thinking about the fact that I was going to have this little creature that was going to grow up and start asking me questions and asking me about my childhood. And I was going to witness their childhood and like, what is that going to be like? And it's not going to be quite like mine was. And I started getting nostalgic for my childhood, the adventures I went on with my friends, how I grew up. And then it was like this weird thing, like this flood of like, when I was in high school, I got this notion that I really wanted to, this very romanticized notion that like one day I want to make an animated feature film and I want to make it like with just like my best friends or my partner and just like keep it like this insular, independent thing. And I studied animation. I work as a film editor now, and I've been really fortunate to get work on films. But I never did make that film. I never made the feature animated film. And my wife and I had worked on shorts together where I would animate the characters and she would do the background paintings for the animations. And we'd done that in a few shorts and commercials. And it was like we were in this nesting mode and, kind of getting ready to be parents. And it was like, well, while we're doing this, why don't we make, I have this movie that's like starting to gel from these memories of being a kid. Like, let's make this animated feature together. And so I started writing and she was like, yeah, of course. And little did we know like how long it was going to take and what was going to, that it would become this big, kind of a little bit of a naive notion that we'd get to get it done quickly as we were becoming parents. But it turned into a really fun adventure over the past, 8 years, honestly. Life happened and we suddenly had a family to take care of. And so it was like, all right, let's keep working my day jobs. Let's keep, I edited, I think like 9 or 10 features in the course of the time that we worked on the Weird Kids. And then I'd edit during the day for 8 to 10 hours. And then I'd go home at night and I would animate for like 6 to 8 hours after everybody gone to bed.
Wow. Wow.
So,
Wow.
so that,
So, yeah.
yeah,
No, go ahead. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you
no,
off.
no. So that's a long-winded kind of answer of kind of what the inspiration was and how it kind of came
Yeah.
to be. But that was it. It was just, just this nostalgia that kicked in and just this remembrance of the things I wanted to do. And like, hey, it's not too late to try to pursue this dream. And then also like, I don't know, just it also reinvigorated my love of like I love movies and I love getting to work on movies, but it also reinvigorated my love of movies where I kind of started remembering the influences, the type of movies that I liked and that made me want to make movies as a kid and made me excited about going to the theater and making home movies at home and then later in life with making it a career. And
Hmm.
so it just kind of it was like this rejuvenation, honestly.
That's really interesting, and that kind of
brings me to the question that I had for you. One of them I have for you is so in that process, which that's got to be you're literally it's blood, sweat, and tears into that, and so but you're being creative, and it has your movie has a very unique art style. And so did that come about from just you and your wife like working together on the art style? Did that kind of just happen organically? Pat and I were talking about like how the eyes are very like eye-catching for the
Uh-huh.
animation, very emotive. And yeah, where did you guys, or how did you all come up with that specific style?
Um, I kind of so part of it is just based on like the characters are kind of based on my drawing style, but also
Gotcha.
this like need for it to be. I wanted it to kind of feel like a preteens. At least the character designs kind of like a preteens like notebook, like a high school notebook, like characters that I would have drawn as a kid. And but also like to me, like especially I'm always like watching faces and eyes when I'm working on like feature editing. Like that's the
Mm-hmm.
thing. Like when I'm watching performances, I'm watching um, the performers' eyes and their mouths, their faces, and so I was like, okay, well, the eyes need to be pretty solid here,
Yeah.
and but I think it turned into a weird style because I think that there's a trend these days where in animation there's a lot of kind of overshooting in the action to make it big
Okay.
as far as like expressions.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's like a squash and a stretch and like a jump and land kind of when you're going between when they're going between emotions or expressions. And I wanted something a little more subtle than that, but still expressive. You know what I mean? And I think I landed in it. For me, I'm happy with it. But I know it's a little different than kind of what's the trend in animation right now.
Yeah, it's very distinct, and
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, it immediately set itself apart from other animated features right away, and I thank you, I appreciate that.
Oh man, thanks. And a lot of that, and then and Hannah is just she's my wife, my
Mm-hmm.
collaborator. She's an amazing artist, a great painter, and I think it was one of those things where like she could go really deep into detail and things, and there's times where it's like, well, no, let's dial it back a little bit because it's kind
Sure.
of it's because she's also she's a perfectionist and loves
Yeah.
loves to paint in great detail, and so there's like finding a balance with her of like, hey, no, this is good, like this feels right, like is
Yeah.
it, if it feels right enough for this scene, then let's move forward, and then and so together we just kind of found that balance, and then it became I would do these like really rough like background layouts where I'd just like show the character where they're going to be and like, okay, well, these kind of things need to be in the environment, kind of like these really probably terrible
Yeah.
sketches.
Yeah.
And then she would kind of take that and be like, oh, okay. And like make it a real beautiful background or something that the characters could live in and interact with.
Ah, neat.
Yeah, and the it really shows in the finished product, and
Really does.
it's hard for a perfectionist to move on to from things.
Yeah.
It is. No, man, it's hard for me. I mean, if I'm being honest, every time the movie is played a festival, I mean, the movie has 2,500 shots in it.
Oh, wow.
2,500 individual animated
Wow.
shots. And so by the time we finished it, I felt good about everything. They're all composited too. So it's almost 2,500 visual effects shots as well. And then the edited together. But I didn't, I would finish a shot, the character animation, I finished the composite, and I'd watch it over again and I'd make tweaks, but to until I felt good about it. But every time I watched it projected, I've been like, oh my gosh, you can see like that line goes stray, or like this guy's ear goes a little weird. And so I like the first time I think I revised 750 shots before the next festival, and then it was 200 shots before the next festival, and then I think this last time it's about to play at Fright Fest in a couple of weeks, and I revised 5 shots, and I think I'm
Wow.
done. So
Wow.
Hey, got it down to single digits. That's
yeah, yeah, finally, yeah, totally.
oh, with coming of age stories, a lot of times people will say that it's based on someone that they knew or it's based on a specific time in their life. How much of the movie is based on real life incidents or kids? I'm assuming the Night Child is probably not so real.
Yeah, definitely not real, but I think the characters are all based on uh, friends I had. A lot of them are kind of amalgamations, and then like also like mixed in with progression, projections of ways I hoped to have been, or like the ways I wished to be as a teenager and things like that. But it's a weird mix of like reality and like and imagination from me being that age, and then kind of what I like. The stories that I like to watch when it comes to films and coming of age stories. Um, but Doug very much like the younger brother, who's one of the kind of central characters, I guess. It was very much me. I had a really bad mullet. I was, kind of a late bloomer, and so that Doug is pretty much me at that age, basically.
That's really neat. So, I mean, I gotta imagine that, like, well, when it comes to like the characters and how that works, how was it directing like the voice acting? Like, did you have a lot of input in that, or did you let your voice actors kind of run free with that? How'd that work?
It was like, man, I was so fortunate with every voice actor that I had. Like, there's some actors that were local to El Paso that I had kind of met over the years working out here that I knew that I wanted to work with, like Brian Seeley, Glenn Bolton, who now lives in Los Angeles, Sydney O'Donnell, and but then I also, lucked out and I was able to work with Eller Coltrane, who was in Boyhood, Angela Bettis, who was like in May and Girl Interrupted and The Woman, an amazing actress. And then Sean Bridgers, who was in Room, on Deadwood, also in Lucky Key's movie, The Woman. And just everybody was so positive and just game for being a part of the film that, like, each person came in to the studio individually, and we'd spend like a day or two, and it's almost like a radio play almost. It was weird. Like, we would talk about the script and we would like set up each scene, and then we would just record it. And the actors brought so much. Like, when it comes to it, like I like actors to have creative freedom. You know what I mean? Like, we talk about things, it's a collaboration, but there's a reason I chose the people that I wanted to voice these characters. It's because I wanted them to bring them to life and to have input and to, bring a part of themselves and care and all those things. And so, I think it all worked out really nicely with each person, and I just still tickled that I got to work with everybody that I did.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and then what's funny is the hardest character to cast was Doug, who was most like me, and it was like we had all these, Lucky McKee came on board and was an early just supporter, and just he would just push me and be like, hey, you got to get this down, let's make this. And like, I would workshop the script with him in his living room when he first moved out here, and like, we'd listen to it out loud and make notes, and it'd be like, okay, and I would rewrite. Once we got into shape, he's just like, all right, man, you got to just keep moving forward, like, let's get some actors, and so we were recording in his living room, or his guest bedroom. We'd set up like this little sound recording room that our sound designer came to town and set up, and like each person would come over or come into town, and we'd record for a day. And I'd gotten all these great actors, and we were just like, who's going to play Doug? And it was like, I'm not going to, like, I personally was not going to. And it was like, well, maybe we get one of the actors to do like another kind of voice. And then my sister was visiting, Tess, my youngest sister, and also we just kind of like lucky, and I looked at each other and was like, what about Tess? And she came in, and it just clicked, like something made sense. It's like, like Bobby Hill's voice is a woman, Bart Simpson's voice is a woman, and they're, that's not unheard of in animation. And so Tess came in, and she understood who Doug was because she lived with, grew up with me, and just she like found this inflection in her voice and kind of brought him to life. So it was really cool to get to work with her, and she had gone to film school and things like that in her life, and so it was cool to kind of bring her back around to film with me. Yeah.
One of the really cool and surprising things about the Weird Kidz is there's this theme of togetherness. Like, obviously with Doug and Mel and Fat, you're gonna get it, but then with the Night Child, there's the togetherness. But even with the townsfolk, so it completely caught me off guard that there was like such strong bonds between them. Was that intentional, or was it just something that came out during the writing?
It definitely was intentional when it came to the kids. I wanted their dynamics to be strong, but also to change, and so I think, there's definitely like a us versus them, the older and the younger at first, and then kind of everybody kind of comes together. And the one thing that was kind of a theme in the background of everything was like this idea of like empathy and beliefs. The learning to understand one another and the relationships we have with one another. The night child, I wanted it to be, kind of like the old Universal creatures where, it's set up to be, they're always advertised as these monster movies. You're like, no, the monster is the thing I most relate to because it is like it has the most emotion or the most, you can have empathy for it. And so I wanted the night child to first be this scary creature and menace, but then like something to come to understand it and to realize like, we're working with nature here, nature's being nature. And then with the townsfolk, and like Dwana and her friendship with the sheriff, it's like I just wanted them to be real, like if they have a relationship, like it should be a relationship. And the townsfolk are bonded by their beliefs that they have established in this their small town and this like have like forged forward with the for a century, and so just wanted everything to kind of be established and feel real and but also have dynamic to change or contrast against the other things that were happening.
Yeah, that's really cool. So I only got one more question for you, and it's I don't know, maybe a little off kilter. I don't know. So at the beginning of your little film, and which I highly recommend people seek out and watch. I really enjoyed it. One of the boys is reading what I would guess is a dirty magazine, and it says Munch and an acronym on it.
Yeah.
Does it stand? Does Munch stand for anything? And I gotta know.
I honestly no. Munch. So Mel is reading a comic book at that point, but it's just, I mean, like there's there's an aspect of comic books where like, when if you're a prepubescent kid and hitting puberty, you're going to start paying attention to certain details of them more than others. Sure. And I think some comic books definitely like go for that. But Munch, it goes back to my little sister Tess actually, because she, when we were growing up, she was always like working on this comic book that she called Munch. And it's like I never knew what it was, and then it became her nickname later on in life, Munch. But it was kind of harkening back. It's just like it's a
that's awesome. That made me feel like a real pervert.
Oh, good. Perfect. No, but hey, that's cool. Great.
No, that's much more endearing and better story.
So there's a moment in there where like there's a guy in the right after we see them reading or see Mel reading the comic book, there's like a guy reading a porno mag at the stand, and he that whole incident actually happened to me. You're talking about things that happen real, like that actually happened to me, that whole interaction, but it happened like in an airport, one of the airport magazine stands when I was like 8 or 9 years old. This guy like just like flashing a penthouse at me and just being like a little something to look forward to. Wow. Just like out of nowhere.
Thanks, guy.
Yeah, like all right. Gave me something to think about.
Wow.
That's funny. You mentioned that the Weird Kidz, it's a coming of age story and it has horror elements, and coming of age and horror go so well together. Like Stephen King is a master of it, and you could pretty much pick any horror movie from the 80s and it'll be some kind of coming of age story. But why do you think those two genres blend so well together?
I think honestly, puberty is kind of horrific. Honestly, it's like your whole world is getting rocked. Your hormones are going nuts. Like your relationship with yourself starts to change. Your relationship with the world around you starts to change because you're changing and you're learning things about yourself. And you're looking at the world differently. Like, and it's kind of an unnerving time, at least to me. When I think back of it, it's kind of unnerving. It's like you watch, and I think that's also why that Weird Kidz that story was kind of attractive to me and started forming the way it did. It was just like that whole moment of when you start watching your friends, like some were changing and they're handling this change better and they're like finding their stride and like going, and you're still kind of, depending on where you are in your development and puberty.
Some people peak then.
No, absolutely. Some people peak and it's like in the moment you're like, God,
they were the coolest. Yeah,
they're so cool. And then what happens later on happens. But it's like but yeah, there's just like that. It's mysterious. It's like you're starting to try to fulfill roles that you think you're supposed to fill as a whatever, a man or a woman or a teenager or like what, or it's like these. But there's so much uncertainty in it, but it requires you to also be kind of brave, to kind of just like, yeah, no, I'm this, and I'm going to be this person. I think that it's something about the uncertainty there is kind of like is ripe for horror and like just that those insecurities and fears.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. And kind of along those lines, like we were talking about the art earlier, and that's one of the reasons that the Weird Kidz stood out. But also you really don't see that much animated horror. And they seem like tailor
No,
made for each other. Like, why do you think that
there
is?
should be happy. I think that I think it has to do with like the people, the larger kind of entities with money, just being afraid of what that is. Because there was a trend for a while, at least on social media, if you were like looking at reading animation creators and different people, there's like this weird feeling that there was going to be a need or a support for animated horror movies and like these different type of pipelines. Um, and people are like, yeah, no, we want to see stuff like this. But most of the creators talking about going to like studios that they're getting deals, things like that, trying to pitch these things. The money people get a little squeamish about it, like uncertain, because also it's still also kind of animation is still looked at as a kids platform in
Right.
many ways, especially in that context of money, and so it's kind of like it's too uncertain. But then you look at there's some bold things that have been made, like I think Castlevania. I don't know if you watch the Netflix
Yeah.
Castlevania, like it definitely has some pretty strong horror elements to it, and it's largely successful, and so I think it's worked. And I don't know if y'all ever watched Infinity Train that was on. It was an amazing. It
Yeah.
was during the course of making Weird Kidz, Infinity Train ran like 4 seasons. They had it on Max, and then it's one of those casualties once Discovery Plus
Oh,
bought it. But it
man.
was an amazing. It like was. They
Oh,
crept in. They
I
crept
did
into
see this.
horror,
Yeah.
and it's like it was weird. Like they kind of like it's like they slid one by. Like they made this kind of this YA kind of story that took place in this surreal place, but on this train that had different cars where all these different realities could kind of happen. Or a lot of the physics were different. They each had a
Right.
design, but it became like Twilight Zone-ish, and then it became straight out horror-ish. And there was just like they kind of snuck it in there, and it was had a really good following. But yeah, it was unfortunately one of the casualties once Discovery took over HBO there. But yeah, I think there's a place for horror in animation, and a lot of it kind of some of this needs some brave people that are willing to kind of just support those projects and put them out there.
Yeah, and it's
Yeah.
funny that you mentioned Max because I mean, Evil Dead obviously not an animated movie, but that was going to go straight to Max before someone there made the decision to put it out in theaters, and it
Yeah,
was a huge success. So yeah, it'll just take someone with brass stones, I guess they say, to
yeah, no, totally. Hopefully it happens. I would love to see it. I think that, and then it's just like you can do so much with animation and horror in that. There's and budgetarily you need like $100 million budgets to pull off. You can draw it and have it. Not that there are some very expensive animated films and things like that, but
right,
there's budgetarily I think the limits kind of the doors get blown open in animation, and you can pull off some pretty um, you know not just visually interesting things, but also in conceptually and in the story. You can take things pretty far.
yeah, very
Okay.
true.
I lied. I have one more question, Pat. Sorry.
Oh yeah, no, go for it.
And on that
Sure.
line, on that train of thought, like, so when the Weird Kids was over it, there's like kind of a great shot of was it Blackbird and like the whole, and it
Mhm.
made me think, and just in talking right there, could you see like that world be like a series in which there was
Oh,
like weird stuff happening on the regular?
no, that actually is I mean, I know exactly what happens from this point forward. And what's
Okay,
weird,
cool.
in the development, I actually came up with the story of what happens next before I came up with this story. It was just kind of like
Oh,
I something about I love the idea of horror happening in the suburbs, and
Mm.
just like also just the mystery of neighbors, and like how
Oh,
you kind of don't know, you don't really know your neighbors.
the
And
X-Files episode where the housing association is like a cult that's like got the
oh
like
yeah,
the
Oh
like
yeah.
one of the
I love the
all-time,
X Files.
yeah,
Yeah,
all-time
no,
great episodes. Yeah.
fantastic.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I have like there's a whole, and I think it brings in different, that if the Weird Kids was to continue, there are some horror elements, there's some more like straight up thriller elements, and my love of juvenile delinquent movies comes more into play as far as influences. But I also like the idea of taking, I love stories where I love, I mean, as a human, I mean, in my personal life, like there's these moments in life where like you have these like this day or a night, and you're like, okay, I'm gonna go out with my friends, and all of a sudden it's like it turns into all night long, and like this series of things just keeps happening, and then by the time the morning happens, and you're going home, you're like, I'm a little different. Like something changed here. Like I was not expecting this night, but like I'm a changed person, and something happened here.
Yeah.
And so like I liked the idea of like having these characters that would have more adventures back in their normal lives in the suburbs, normal lives and air quotations, but um, kind of throwing them into this one night where they all kind of come out changed in one way or another, better or worse. And then you send them back home, and like we pick up that story. And I was like, okay, that'd be kind of cool, And so, I want to keep the story going, and love to
Excellent.
continue on. And I'm also itching to animate. So
That's one thing that I really love that I always forget about it in movies, but when it just takes place over the course of a night or a few hours, I really, really enjoy that about stories. I think I like the tightness of it.
Yeah.
yeah, no, there's something about it, and just every once in a while, like something like that happens. Like it doesn't happen all the time, but every once in a while you have these like pivotal things that
Mhm.
somehow like you will be changed in 2 hours or the course of a night, or I love
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
So, you mentioned Fright Fest. Where else can people see the Weird Kids? Where is it going to be in the next few weeks and months?
Um, right now, let's see, it's going to be playing Fright Fest at the end of the month on the 25th, which is a Friday, and then that's Sunday. There's a couple other festivals that I can't announce yet, just because they haven't had their announcements, but it's still making the festival circuit around. Sorry, here, stateside and internationally, it's kind of starting to get into, make the genre festival circuit, and also like the animation festival circuit. So it's been kind of fun to kind of share it in foreign territories and here, and watch it with different audiences. And then for those listeners that are local to El Paso, it will be playing on the 29th of September in El Paso Film Festival. Now there's a
Cool.
chance to see it on the big screen there.
Awesome. So definitely, if you have the chance, check out the Weird Kids.